Hey everyone, I'm here with David Quel. David is adjunct professor at Wesley Theological Seminary, and he also teaches classes helping churches start ministries for families with autistic family members. And Dave and I are actually longtime friends from our college days. So, Dave, welcome. How you doing?
I'm doing good. And it's only been a couple years since we've seen each other. Like what, four? Well, last time we were in college, right?
Right. I know. We've just made it into our late 20s. Yeah, I remember you were a couple years older than some of us, and you turned 25. And I remember one of our other friends, Craig, said, "Dave, you're a fourth done," and now we're both well past that. And actually, yeah. Anyway, we're well past that. At least, well, more than half done. All right. So, Dave, tell us just a little bit about what you do.
Sure. Like Marcus said, I teach for Wesley Theological Seminary, which runs out of actually Southwestern University, and in conjunction with that, with a website known as Be a Disciple. Now, with Be a Disciple, what they do is you teach Christian classes as an online instructor, and you make up your own classes. So this was a perfect avenue for me to start teaching ministry, especially towards families that have kids like my own.
Yeah.
Because a lot of cases like mine, it's hard for families to bring their autistic child or any family member to church when they're dealing with autism. So they just don't go.
Yeah.
And churches a lot of times don't have training on how to deal with individuals like this.
Yeah. So that's great, and we're gonna get into that. And you have quite a story. And I remember when we reconnected, on Facebook when that became a thing. That's kind of how it happened. I just remember being very amazed by your story and the three autistic sons that you have. And so we're going to talk about that. But I do want to ask one quick little get to know you question before we get into the meat of our conversation, and that is, hey. World college buddies, like what's one of your favorite college memories?
One of my favorite college memories is that in the apartment I lived in with three other guys from Slippery Rock, we were all part of Campus Crusade.
Yep.
And we would invite students off campus, including yourself, to come over and hang in our apartment.
Yeah.
And we loved playing a game called Mafia, a card game.
Yeah. Yep.
Now, Mafia, you had somebody in the middle who's a narrator, somebody who was a police person, and the rest were townspeople. And the Mafia tried to knock off people one by one and hoping that nobody would discover who they were. And there was times when we'd have like 30 or 40 people sitting in
Yeah.
our apartment and just playing this game. And
Yeah.
it's wonderful that we were able to minister
Yeah.
incoming freshmen and other college students in that manner.
Yeah. Those were good times. I totally forgot about Mafia. That was, I don't remember. I'd have to get a refresher on how to play that again, but that was a lot of fun. Yeah. Good times. Good times. All right. So, Dave, let's get into your story. So you have three sons. All three of them are autistic, and so why don't you just sort of tell us the story of how you kind of found out with your first son that he was autistic? What was that like for you?
Okay. Uh, Jacob is 22. And at that time, my wife was in med school and I was working as a youth director. So I was the one who was home most of the time with him. And it was normal. Everything was normal as far as developmental. And around the age 2, he just stopped talking altogether. And I thought, did I drop him? Did something happen? Did we feed him something wrong? But when we look back, we started noticing things along the patterns with autistic individuals, like going to the mall and he would just circle and circle and circle the fountain like 20 or 30 times.
Hmm.
Or he would be stuck on going certain ways. Like if you went a different direction in the car than he wanted to go, he would get really upset. Certain little tendencies, constantly biting everything, what called, and little kids do this, I know, but this progressed into age 2 and beyond, what's called pica. Pica is where you put everything in your mouth, and with Jacob, it was fertilizer, it was toys, it was He bit the window. You name it, he would bite it. So we ended up taking him to Children's Hospital in Pittsburgh and getting him diagnosed because we were concerned that he was, with the developmental delay and with the stop talking, we just knew something was wrong.
Yeah.
And neither one of us were familiar with autism at all.
Yeah. So, so how did you guys feel? Like, what was that emotional experience like for you guys?
For me, it was tougher than my wife. My wife has always been one to just roll with the punches. And with Jacob, especially, it felt like somebody had pulled my heart out and just stomped it on the floor. I wanted to have a relationship with my sons that most fathers, would really want to,
right?
But not be able to show him how to bounce a basketball or how to explain to him about about hockey. He loves hockey. Explain to him about the Pittsburgh Penguins, or show him how to shoot a puck, or even at that time it was all finger foods. He couldn't even use a spoon or anything like that. Realizing that it couldn't take him out in a lot of different places because the noise level was too loud. Couldn't take him to a parade, couldn't take him to a public pool because the noise level was just deafening to him, and it's still the same way to this day. So it's missing out on what would most people consider normal father-son events to do together.
Yeah.
Go to a ball game or learn how to play catch in the backyard together.
Yeah.
Simple things like that.
Wow.
It felt like that I was losing out.
Yeah.
And that's very selfish to say. I understand that, but
yeah. But understand, I mean, it was a loss, right? It's a loss. And
I know you basically have to relearn how to be a parent.
Yeah. Right. So then you had a second son and a third son, and both of them turned out to also be, I don't know if the right word is severely autistic, or I don't know what the right terminology is, but not high functioning. Okay. And so tell us about how you realized that they also, like with your second and then your third, and what was your process of recognizing it and then having to accept that again? Yeah.
Each of them are about 3 years apart.
Okay.
So with Andrew, we thought he was just mimicking everything that was going on with Jacob. And then we realized he really wasn't progressing. He wasn't talking. We had him tested. Jacob was tested around age 2, which is very common when it shows up. With Andrew, we waited till he was about 5.
Okay.
Because we're in denial, which families do. And it was a little bit easier to accept Andrew because he wasn't talking from the start.
Okay.
So, and we thought, well, we can handle 1, we can handle 2.
Yeah.
And then Stephen came along another 3 years later. And with Stephen, I have to admit, I did not handle it very well. I said point blank to my wife, I can't do this. This is too much for me. And I can honestly say my wife saved our marriage.
Wow.
Because I told her I couldn't handle it, that I was going to move someplace else, but I would always be there to help her. So she told me if I left, I might as well just not come back through the door.
Yeah.
If I left, it was all over between us and me and the kids, and she knew that I wouldn't walk out.
Yeah. Wow. I think that gives us those of us who don't have that in our families, kind of a pretty powerful understanding, picture, image of the struggle that families who do have autism in their families go through. And so the next question then would be, what kind of support did you find from your family, and then also from the church? Like, what kind of support did you find, and what did you need?
With us, because I had started working full time for a church as a youth director, and she was still going through med school. So the main thing was having people to be with the kids when we could not be.
Mm-hmm.
That became very difficult, especially when we had Stephen. So now we had three of them.
Mm-hmm.
Because my mother was older and couldn't handle them anymore. And my mother-in-law, what happened was Rebecca's dad got cancer, so she was dealing with his dad. So we had all of our relatives worked full time, and some, I don't want to throw them under the bus, some had a hard time dealing with it even more than we did.
Sure.
Because they had no experience as well.
Yeah.
Throughout the years, we've had different people come in through different agencies and work with our kids, but we had trouble being serviced because we had three of them, not just one.
Wow.
Government agencies are great when you can get the help, but that's not always easy.
Yeah.
So I stopped working full time and started working part time.
Okay.
And learned how to be a stay-at-home dad.
Wow.
And just took part times, off hours when my kids were asleep.
Yeah. Yeah. And part time. What kind of part time work were you? You were a pastor eventually. Was it that at that time you were pastoring, or?
I stopped working as a youth director. I started preaching as what they call an itinerant pastor.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be gone for 3 hours on a Sunday and preach 3 different churches, but that's the only day I work.
Right.
Started putting myself through seminary, but it was all night classes when my wife was around.
Okay.
But that also became a difficult issue because Jacob had gotten older. At that time, he was around 8, and he started getting very aggressive with my wife. Yeah. Like if he didn't get what he wanted, he would literally attack her, bite her, scratch her, hit her, anything he could do that he thought could get him what he wanted.
Wow. And what happened then with that?
It became to the point where we had to make a choice between him staying here or her leaving.
Wow.
And our other 2 children were not safe either. He was going after them. So he ended up going into a mental hospital and eventually got him into a group home.
Right.
He struggled for many years, probably like 15 years before he moved into adulthood and started to mature.
Yeah.
We've had a long road with him. That would be a whole other interview.
And how old is he now? 22? Yeah. Okay. And so your other sons are 19 and 16, is that right? Okay. Okay. Gosh. And so then so family, you had a little bit of support, but it was very hard to get the kind of support you really needed from family. You had some government agencies that I guess kind of helped out. What about the church? What kind of support did you get from the church?
What's interesting about it was the first church I worked for was my wife's home church she grew up in. And there were some people that were understanding, but a lot of people weren't. Because, her and I couldn't be in worship together. It was a kid who couldn't be in children's ministry without his mother.
Yeah.
So that didn't go very well. And he wasn't reacting the same as other kids do.
Yeah.
So that he really couldn't be a part of the ministry there. So we would take turns going different worship services. They tried to be understanding with our work schedule. There were times when we had to cancel things, or I sometimes didn't go to work if, like other parents deal with when your kids are sick. Sometimes you can't.
Sure.
But as far as reaching out to us and learning about how our kids were different from everybody else, we didn't see much of that.
Yeah.
And probably 4 or 5 churches that we went to over the span of our beginning of our marriage, I should say.
Yeah.
It took a long time before we were able to find a church that would reach out to us a little bit more.
So you did eventually find a church that was more helpful. Okay, so I want to ask about that in a minute. But before we do, so why do you think it was that the churches that were less helpful were I mean, were they bad people, or what was it? Why weren't they more helpful?
I'd like to say that, but that's not totally true.
Right.
People have a tendency to be fearful of what they don't understand and what they don't know.
Hmm.
And that hasn't changed over the years.
Yep.
So to be re-educated is a challenge.
Yeah.
When we were successful as far as being able to go to worship and have our kids be involved within a ministry, we had started training some individuals who worked with them. We would take turns being with our kids within the ministry setting, so the people would be able to ask questions and understand a little bit better. I think it was the biggest problem we had within churches was that they wanted to group all the kids together and not understand that there's different needs, different different areas of progression among these kids than most children, and they didn't want to take the time to understand that.
Yeah.
So.
There's like a certain capacity that a church needs, emotional, spiritual, mental, maybe, I don't know, or just in terms of compassion, or being able to take into account someone else's needs, struggles, and I mean, it's maybe human nature to worry about ourselves first, right? But part of the Christian life, right? Part of the spiritual life is to, what does Paul say? Philippians 2, right? I'm forgetting the exact words, but consider other interests as much as your own, or right, and all that. And so anyway, so when I think about churches doing any kind of ministry, but in this case specifically, a ministry for families with autism in their families, right, there is a level of compassion and awareness and willingness to be aware, right? It's easy for human beings to put up blinders or to pretend that certain things aren't what they actually are, or as bad as they might seem, or I don't need to worry about that. So anyway, okay, so then you found a church that was more helpful. I don't know. Tell us, like, how helpful was it? What were some of the things that they did that the other churches didn't do? And what gave them, do you think, the ability to do that? First of all, tell us what they did that the other churches didn't do.
One thing they did, and we had talked about this before, but the people who are listening don't know that. They had started what we refer to as a sensory room.
Right.
With the sensory room, you have things that are designed for that population, like big fluffy pillows or bean bags, comfortable area to sit in. What's called, or different sensory toys. Like most people enjoy, like tapping a pen or holding something in your hand, like a coffee cup.
Yep.
These kids, it's always something you need to fuss with. Okay. So is it something that has little knobs on the end of it that they can pull out, or different? It's hard to explain if you don't see it.
Yeah.
But the whole room was set up as something where they couldn't hurt themselves or put something in their mouth that would be bad for them.
Right.
You have to. It's almost like having a room for a baby, but on a grander scale.
Okay.
So this church was willing to do that, to talk to us and see what each individual was like that was going into that ministry. It wasn't just our family. There was a couple other families within the church.
Okay.
And we started to design a worship service geared towards families like ours. The associate was fantastic. He took time to sit down with us to hear what would these kids be interested in, what kind of music would they like, how would the service be different. And that's when we hit a snag, because they still wanted to do a traditional worship service.
Oh, okay.
And the best example I can give is a responsive reading.
Yeah.
Listen to somebody do responsive reading, it eventually turns into sounding like a teacher from Snoopy. Wah, wah,
Oh
wah.
yeah, right,
It just it's all blended in,
yeah,
and nobody's really exciting. You know, um, somebody on the autism spectrum isn't going to listen to a half-hour sermon.
right,
5 minutes if you're lucky.
right,
And the music has to be upbeat. It can't be, the old rugged cross. It has to be a little bit different than that.
hmm,
You know,
yeah,
so that's where we had our snag, was trying to change the worship services geared towards families like our own.
yeah,
But we appreciated the effort that they tried.
okay,
Um,
yeah.
so we,
So,
so, go ahead.
well, I was gonna say, so were they starting a whole separate worship service, so they still had their regular worship service, but then they were going to start a whole new one for you and a few other families, which is fantastic. I mean, what a wonderful effort. You know, and so, but it was hard for them to let go of some of the traditional ways of doing church. Okay, so that then gets into um, uh, right, the kind of transformation that I think needs to happen for those who are doing ministry for families with autism in it, but also almost any. It's like contextual ministry, right? What's the context, and if you're moving into a new part of town or into a new country or an unreached people group or whatever, and you're sharing the gospel, what do what does this context need? How does the gospel connect with this particular context? So anyway, so I don't know if it's exactly the same thing, but it sounds similar to me.
Yeah.
Um, like the context of a group of families with family members who have autism is going to be a different kind of a context than of one where there is no one with autism, right? So how? Okay, the question is. What would have helped them become the kind of church or the kind of church family members, leaders, to be able to um, serve the needs that you guys had? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
What do you think?
Um, One of the things I start with when I taught my class, and I recommend this book all the time, it's by a woman named Barbara J. Newman. It's called Autism in Your Church, where it breaks down basically what autism is like and how to reach out to them, how to make church differently, with some suggestions I can make that really helped us and it helped the other families. And this was all part of my dissertation when I got my doctorate. Was taking the time to interview families. What are the needs of the children? What are the things that would set them off? Like with my kids, the example I give, I told you about the loud noise.
Yeah.
Send them into a blind rage, and if you didn't know something like that, it would come as a shock.
Yep.
And with autism, the problem is like any other child, every one of them are different.
Mm-hmm.
So it takes time to get to know the families and get to know the children and revamp what you're doing for ministry. A lot of people want to do Sunday school, or they want to do vacation Bible school and use one program so you can have 90 kids and it looks great.
Yeah.
Well, if you want to do a ministry with this population, like we said, it can't be just the same.
Yeah.
But starting out with interviewing the families, seeing if there's a safe area where you can have a sensory room such as that.
Yeah.
Making it known to the church that this is an area we want to move into. We want to reach out to this population. Do we have anybody who has experience doing so?
Yeah.
Anybody who's taught special needs classes? Yeah. Anybody who'd be willing to be trained or learn, take time out and, be part of the Sunday school class, be volunteers.
Yep.
You and I both know we both work for churches for over 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have the volunteers who have the heart to see God in each and every person. The ministry suffers.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's where That's where it all starts, is seeing them as individuals
Yeah.
that God has created, and not just as somebody different who's
Yeah.
going to cause problems.
That's great. That's super helpful. I appreciate you saying that it starts just by getting to know the families, interviewing them, and learning about them. This is what I heard. Learning about them, not just sort of as a general population of people who have autism in their families, because I think you said that everybody's different, right? Every person with autism is different. And so getting to know the specific, unique needs and not just needs, but just characteristics, qualities of this person and this family, and how they work together, and what they're used to and accustomed to. I imagine, all these kinds of things. And so then taking all that into account and say, okay, then in light of who we are as a church, how can we serve this family or these families? So I'm just kind of thinking through, if I was a pastor, wanting to serve a family. Okay, who are we? What are our resources? And you said this, what skills are in the congregation, and what rooms are available? What physical spaces are available? And then you mentioned just helping the congregation understand. And so there's some learning. So there's learning about the families, but also learning about autism in general, probably, right? And then what do you do when there's resistance? Has there been any resistance? Like, why do we need to do this? Talk about that for a minute.
Um, One of the last churches I worked for, I I had the blessing of working with two sisters who had done this for years, because they both had autistic individuals within their families, so they learned, what it was like, and how to train other people within the church. The pushback, how we dealt with it, was helping the congregation get to know the individuals within their church that were on the special needs spectrum,
Mm-hmm.
right up front.
Yeah.
The way we did that was we had a service that was just myself, these women, and individuals who were on the spectrum. Took the individual gifts of the kids. Like, my kids were greeters. They can't talk, but they can shake somebody's hand. So as soon as people come in, oh, we never met your kids before. Is this your kids? Yeah. We didn't think they could be in public.
Yeah. Right.
And one individual, I hope he does do this one day. His desire in life is to be a preacher.
Hmm.
So him and I broke up this scripture, and we split it in half, and I preached one part and he preached the other, because he was more of a high functioning individual, and he knew how to understand scripture, and he was learning how to get comfortable speaking in front of people.
Yeah.
So he did that. Another girl, very shy, but she was verbal. She would never communicate, so she read just the scripture for the day.
Hmm.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Each, like anybody else, we all have certain gifts. So it was getting to know these families and what they were like, but helping our congregation see that these kids could function within a somewhat normal environment if somebody was willing to reach out to them.
Yeah. 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 That's good. There's a lot to learn, I think, right, for those of us who don't really have much experience with autism. But odds are a lot of our listeners, or at least a good amount of them, have folks in their congregations with family members who have autism. And some of them are probably thinking, you know what, we do need to do something for these families. We do need to serve them, love them, minister to them, provide spaces for them to be able to worship, and probably find some rest in the sense of resting in community with each other, right? So if someone is, imagine a pastor who's like, okay, I want to figure this out. I want to get started somehow. What encouragement or what tips or what advice would you give to someone who's like, how do I start? What would you say?
I would say start obviously by looking over the list of the people you have from the church. You can start with after you talk to the church leadership. I want to do this. You okay with me putting something within the bulletin? Say this is a new ministry we want to start.
Yeah.
Would you want your child to be a part of it?
Yeah.
Starting with that, as well as when you identify the individual families, send them a letter and follow up with that. Do you mind if I come out and visit to you? Some of the best pastors I had that helped me with my kids came to our house because knowing our kids were comfortable in this environment.
Yeah.
So this environment is like with them, and how can that be transferred over to a larger city?
Yeah.
Or even if they're not comfortable right away doing that, can you go, and this is harder nowadays, I realize that, can you go with a school system that has a class like that and see what it's like?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's many different observations as you can.
Yeah.
When I have taught my class over the past 2 years, one of the things I require my students to do is just that.
Yeah.
Find a ministry within a church that is functional, that has special needs kids within them. Yeah. Tell me what works. Tell me what you think is not working, and how you can apply it to your church. That is the last assignment.
Yeah.
And that's the best way I think you can start learning about it. I would sound selfish in saying promote my own class and say, come take my class. I'll help you as much as I can.
Yeah.
That would be great, but if you don't have to do that,
that's okay though. People can start by finding out more about the work that you're doing. And so anyway, this has been super helpful and eye-opening, right? And kind of I think for me and for a lot of ministry leaders, just sort of looking at ministry through another lens, so to speak. Like it's all ministry, it's all serving, it's all loving and caring. But and then here's how we can love and serve this particular need, right? So, Dave, if anybody wanted to find out more about you and the work that you're doing, where could they go?
They could go to the website for beadisciple.com.
Okay.
And my classes are listed there.
Okay.
If they want them to contact you, you have my email.
Yep.
No problem talking to anytime. So.
Awesome.
In this house, I don't sleep much, so anything's okay. So.
Awesome. Well, Dave, thank you so much for being here. This has been a great conversation and fun to do this with you, my old buddy.
One thing I can say before we go is I have been pleased. In some ways, the world has been moving. We've noticed that we need to reach out to different populations, whether it be the African American community, the LGBTQIA community, and it's like we say, it's all the recognition that everybody, whether you get along with them or not, whether you like them or not, everybody is God's children.
That's right.
So finding a way to minister to different populations, is what He's called us to do.
That's right. That's right. Amen. Amen. Thanks, man. I appreciate that. And thanks for being here.